Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's episode, we will be discussing the much anticipated, much hyped adaptation of Dune by Denis Villeneuve. And then we will be reviewing Tom Hardy's return as Venom alongside Woody Harrelson in Venom, There Be Carnage. But before all of that, Nick, what have you been up to recently?
Well, in another somewhat anticipated return, I've been watching the second season of Star Trek Lower Decks on Amazon here and some Paramount CBS thing in America. And this is, of course, the animated wing of the Star Trek media empire, focusing on a bunch of lower-level crewmen on the starship Cerritos, again, a lower-level ship in the fleet, a California class, I think they call it, and their wacky misadventures as they go on gun-level Starfleet missions and fall over and cause chaos in a sort of Rick and Morty-inflected, irreverent sci-fi action show. We reviewed this last year. Sadly, it's not getting a full review this year because, in all honesty, A, there's a lot of big films out, and B, I don't think I have much to say about it, but I didn't also say about the first season. But it is still very good. It is still very fun. If anything, I think it's got a good sense of second season confidence about it here, in that they've clearly got a strong sense of the characters and they can just get stuck straight into it. There's still an enjoyable but not off-putting level of sort of Star Trek geekery here, in that there's quite a lot of references to Star Trek things, but I, someone who probably only gets about between a third to a half of them, I'm still perfectly able to enjoy the show about the characters. And there were some enjoyable jokes about the Borg, which is about my level of Star Trek humour, when one of the characters gets turned into a Borg called Excretus, which I enjoyed enormously. There were a few moments of extremely stupid puerile shit, which I greatly enjoyed, and which I gather some Star Trek fans have taken as beneath the dignity of the franchise. They're not beneath my dignity, I assure you. So yes, another good season for that, I think.
Yeah, I've also been watching this. I think I've got about 2 or 3 episodes left to go. I guess my view on the series so far is that, yeah, it's very funny and I'm still very much enjoying it. It's kind of got that warmth to it as well that I think some of the best sort of sitcoms have, as well as you say, like, it's very funny. There's lots of nods to, bits of Star Trek canon, which is great. But I kind of like this, that it usually ends with like an affirming bit about friendship or togetherness, or people exploring space together. It's similar to that kind of tone that some of the best Simpsons episodes left you with, or King of the Hill.
Yeah, I think that's the big difference between it and Rick and Morty. They get a lot of comparisons because I think one of the writers used to be a big writer on Rick and Morty, and the animation style is kind of similar. And they also share a sort of enjoyment of the quick, irreverent, sudden, weird or horrible thing happening. But Rick and Morty does tend to lean quite far into that random horribleness thing. A lot of episodes do sometimes end with a certain sense of despair at the emptiness and futility of the universe, whereas Star Trek Lower Decks tends to pull back on that a bit and come to as Alistair said, a sort of sitcom-like warmth about how friendship is ultimately good and the world probably isn't actually a pit full of misery.
Yeah, which is one of the many things to enjoy about it. And I do like, all the kind of little canon nods, such as they had Tom Paris from Voyager in one episode. There was a nod to the species in the episode of Next Generation where they only speak in memes. That one, I think, has become a bit of like an internet favourite, so I'm good to see it got picked up. I can't remember the species name now and it's annoying me.
Yeah, in the Tom Paris episode, they leaned back into that thing where at least one of the main characters is meant to be a massive Star Trek fanboy, and he has like a Tom Paris commemorative plate, which is certainly a thing to have. I think I may have found that joke a bit annoying in Season 1. I'm not sure whether they've downplayed it slightly in Season 2 or if I've just reached the level of acceptance, but I didn't mind it here. I actually found it quite funny. Yeah. And they refer to Voyager as Voy, which I'm guessing is what you call it on the fan forums. I'm guessing that's the joke we're doing there, even though I'm not on those forums and don't know.
No, I don't know if that is an actual fan thing, but it's the sort of thing that really obviously could be. I guess because it saves time. I do know that obviously, you refer to the the 1960s series as the
TOS.
TOS,
which isn't that a joke they did in the first season, referring to the Kirk series as TOS for a really stupid reason.
Yeah, but it stands for something else. But I can't remember. But yeah,
totally original superheroes or something. I won't know. It was about that stupid.
I know, but that's just kind of where the humor of the show comes from, and it really does work. And I think your point that you opened with is a good one, of saying that like there isn't really so much to say about the second series. I just feel it's kind of very tonally consistent, quality consistent. They did something that worked well in the first series, and they've lo and behold done it again, and it's worked again.
Yeah, they've refined it well, I think. They know what they're doing at this point. I would say that of the 2 Star Trek series I'm currently staying roughly on top of, which is of course this one and Discovery. I enjoy Discovery a reasonable amount. I think this is probably a better show. I think this is certainly a show that is more efficiently and successfully doing what it set out to do. Whereas Discovery, I just get the feeling they're sort of wandering around in a sort of shonky, making it up as they go a long way. It still, I think, for the most part works in Discovery. I quite enjoy it, but I think this is definitely a more efficient, better made show.
Yeah, I spoke to a friend of mine who's like a massive Star Trek fan, and he's one of the ones who doesn't absolutely hate Discovery as some fans do. And I think the way he said is that he just feels more relaxed that Lower Decks will get it right in terms of, like tell a good story and like put out a good episode. He says the thing about Discovery is he said it's not always terrible, but it is a bit of a gamble, whereas with Lower Decks you just feel you're in safe hands, you're always going to get a good bit of TV.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they've kept that record up. I watched the whole of this season over a couple of weeks recently, and yeah, I'm not sure there was a bad one in it. Good run. I'll be there next year. So yeah, that was me. Alistair, what have you done in the last however long?
So for the last couple of weeks, I have been at the London Film Festival, which those of us who follow the Twitter account for the podcast will know. But yeah, trying to get ahead of the curve by seeing films that may be the big films of tomorrow, or at least the obscure films of tomorrow that hipsters are talking about. This is the first time that I've done the London Film Festival in person since the pandemic, so it's good to be back in the cinema, seeing sort of strange films. Slightly fewer films I went to see this year, not like 14, which I did one year, which, if anything, was too much. But some highlights, which good. There was a documentary called Burn It Down, about Woodstock 99. Although being about an event that happened 20 years ago, they managed to make it very relevant to the present. I really enjoyed Paris 13th District, which is a sort of modern millennial update of the kind of Paris romance. It's very, very good. Yeah, it's just a great sort of slice of cinema, beautifully shot. Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon, which was really good. Sort of comedy, crime, supernatural film. One of those ones that's hard to pigeonhole, but very good. Another highlight was a sci-fi film called Users. Yeah, sort of about the environment and our relationship with technology. One of those sort of slightly abstract, unusual films that generally doesn't get a look in at the film festival. It's a good opportunity to pick up films like that are sort of unusual and hard to see.
Yeah, this was our annual whole team MFV trip to the London Film Festival. I went to see Users with Alistair, and yeah, it's a strange sort of montage film which doesn't really have a narrative per se. There was a Q&A with the director afterwards, and as she said, a lot of her goal was to show you this series of images, some of which go on for quite a long time, and just let you sort of sit with them and really stare into the nuance of them and just sort of see where they took you. There was a bit of voiceover, and there was one like talking head to camera bit. But yeah, it's a very strange film. I think kind of much like she described it when she was talking about the individual images, I sort of went from, oh, this is interesting, to, oh, I'm getting a bit bored of it now, to becoming weirdly fascinated with it again by the end. It was a strange journey to go on.
Yeah. There were some bits that were like staggeringly beautiful, like along lots of shots of like forests and like fire and things like that. It was definitely a mood piece, and it did make you think. Especially, I think the Q&A the director said afterwards is she had some very, very long shots because she wanted to hold something to the point when you're really thinking about what is this a picture of, what is this a shot of, what have I been shown? And it did work, yeah. That like it's kind of hard to dismiss an image when you're made to look at it for much, much longer than is normal in a film.
Yeah, there was, in particular, if you're a fan of pulling your pants about climate change, there's some very long evocative images of burning forests and the orange sky and so on, which was, I think, towards the sort of 2/3 mark on the film, which was about when, you start to really build to a height of fear.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting raft of films. There's also one film that I saw which I don't know if I could say I enjoyed or even that I could say I recommended, but it was definitely an experience. This is one that there's a bit of buzz and some controversy around. A film called Titane, French film, which won the Palme d'Or this year. It's this follow-up to Raw, which is a French horror movie from a few years ago, which is very good if you like horror films. This film is, I don't know, it's incredibly intense, incredibly violent. It transgresses most taboos that we have in society and filmmaking involving violence and sex at different points. It's incredibly shocking. It's very, very strange, which makes the whole thing seem really odd. Like, people walked out. Lots of people turned away from large bits they couldn't watch. I don't know. It's one of the most viscerally intense things I've seen in a long time. But I don't know if I'd especially recommend this to anyone.
Yeah, but I get the feeling the shock value is a big part of the film, so I guess we probably shouldn't describe what happens. But Alistair has described what happens to me in the pub because I'm probably never going to watch it. And yeah, it certainly sounds like a thing to witness.
Yeah, I mean, if you're into shocking, unusual, provocative films, or if you want to see a film that you're not going to forget in a while, then go see it. I think it comes out on general release in the UK on the 31st of December. So if you want to finish the year in a cold sweat and not really sure what you think about the world anymore, I can recommend tracking down Titane. it's probably good to go in not knowing what you're expecting, as I did. Apart from I knew this was going to be a body horror film, and I was not disappointed in that regard. But it was good to be at the festival again. Saw another film, a Rwandan sci-fi musical called Neptune Frost. It was incredibly strange. But very, very good, and lots of cool musical bits and things like that. Great drumming, I must say, in that film. But yeah, it was a really good wide variety of stuff. If you want one recommendation from the festival or one film to track down, then other than Detain, which is a thing in its own right, I can strongly recommend Paris 13th District. It's just a great sort of romantic drama. It's got a strong cast, including, and I've forgotten her name, but the woman who was in Dear Stalker and was also in Portrait of a Lady on Fire. So it's got a great cast, and it's just a really good, sort of strong romantic drama. And it's beautifully shot.
Okay, I look forward to it becoming a massive hit. Okay, and first up this fortnight, a very exciting moment in Alistair's young life. It's the new movie Dune, the adaptation of the classic sci-fi novel by Frank Herbert. This is directed by Denis Villeneuve and stars Timothée Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Oscar Isaac, Zendaya, and a cast of dozens of other people who've pretty big in cinema at the moment. This is, of course, about the battle over the resource spice on the planet Arrakis between House Atreides and House Harkonnen, and the young boy Paul, who is the scion of House Atreides and finds himself a bigger figure in this conflict than he perhaps realised. Of course, the book is well known for its dense world building, and Denis Villeneuve is well known for his beautiful, vivid images, so hopefully the two will come together to form a beautiful whole. Alistair, did they?
Yes, in a word, they did. I think, you've hit the nail on the head there, which is that where this film excels is the combination of Denis Villeneuve's visual style, his amazing eye for detail and for really bold, striking cinematic images merged with the rich world of Dune. And the two go very well together. I think when we were discussing Blade Runner 2042, that they would spend what might have been the budget of like a sort of main action scene in another film just on making like a dam just look like amazing, or a cityscape. But in this, it's kind of bringing the planet Arrakis to life in a way that you can really, really get lost in, especially seeing it in IMAX. It's a very faithful adaptation to the book, which I really enjoyed. There's lots of like tiny little nods. Like some of my favourite is that they included the Atreides battle language, the sort of sign language that the Atreides have to communicate sort of covertly, and all sorts of other tiny nods to the book. Possibly my favourite thing about it was that I think Villeneuve struck the right tone, a combination of kind of awe and majesty of this beautiful world, but also it took it seriously and brought in some of the darker aspects of the book, but it wasn't too dark and brooding. There was a real sense of the sublime, which I think Denis Villeneuve does well, which is the sense of awe mixed with terror. So that's how I would describe it in 3 words.
Yeah, I think considering the amount of world building there is, like I read the book earlier this year, and there's a lot of world building you could get sort of lost in, but he's managed to keep the right amount of it above the surface. I mean, there is still a lot of exposition in the first half hour, 45 minutes of this film, which he just about manages to keep on the right side of, boring. It's delivered, but it's not too much long speeches, but it's also, as you say, a lot of stuff which is just happens and is just there and isn't necessarily pointed at, like the sign language thing you mentioned. At no point does anyone actually have an expositionary chat about our battle language, which is like sign language. It's just a thing they do, and it's subtitles, they do it a few times, you get used to it, and that's about it. Yeah, that's one of the touches that makes the world feel present and lived in, as well as just being a lovingly rendered special effects world. A lot like, as you say, his previous film, the Blade Runner sequel. It's a very immersive experience. Although I do think it felt a bit more like a direct focused story. Like, I was prepared to find this quite obtuse, because Blade Runner was not always the most straightforward storytelling. But this is, compared to that, fairly mainstream, I think. Like, I don't think he obfuscated that much. The story was told pretty straightforwardly.
Yeah, exactly. Considering also it's a book that has a lot of stuff about spiritualism and prescience and kind of people being haunted by visions of their future, and quite a lot of metaphysics, which they weave in well. It's not like they're dumbing it down. They bring in like a long section of Paul's visions and, again, how he's frightened of some of the futures that he sees. But they manage to package it all, as you say, into what is a pretty accessible cinematic blockbuster. There's heroes, there's villains, there's betrayals, there's big action scenes. I was curious, going into this film, I was thinking, well, this is a big budget Hollywood action film. There's got to be some big action sequences in it. I wonder which bits of the book they're going to choose to make the scenes. Obviously, there's some obvious ones like the Harkonnens' invasion of Arrakis. But yeah, some other interesting choices that they made along the way, especially building up the character of Duncan Idaho, who was probably not so well served in the David Lynch adaptation in 1985. But yeah, got Jason Momoa here, who's obviously very charismatic. They really worked to build up his relationship with Paul. And so yeah, and then there's a key Duncan Idaho action scene that's very good, about two-thirds of the way into the film. Yeah, so I think that's just another way of saying they've kind of really thought about this is a kind of a book that's got a lot in it and there's a lot going on many levels, but how can we put this into a film that's going to be still like an artistic expression? It's got like phenomenal music and sound design and production design, which is something you associate with Villeneuve. But at the same time, as you say, like it is all kind of in service of telling what is just like an entertaining film.
I think they've streamlined it down a bit because having read the book semi-recently, the book has probably 3 or 4 major viewpoints that all get quite a lot of time. Whereas this film, the Paul character, the lead character played by Timothée Chalamet, isn't in every scene. He is absent sometimes. He is very heavily focused on. He is very much the main through line. Like every scene that doesn't have him in it is usually just a short diversion before we pop back to him. And I think they have slimmed it down a bit to make it more clearly Paul's story for maximum accessibility, which I think does work quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's various things from the book they've dropped as well, like which I think makes perfect sense just to make it work as a film. They've dropped the plot line of everyone thinking that Jessica is betraying them to the Harkonnens. They're aware there's a spy and they think it's Jessica, which is what allows the actual spy to get away with things. I'm not going to spoil it if you've not read the book or see the film yet. They dropped that because it's just to be an extra level of drama. The Mentats are in this a lot less, especially in it a lot less than the Lynch version. Interesting choice, maybe partly to make this film seem different to the David Lynch one, that he went big in for the human computers. They're in this, yeah, and they're part of the background, but I think they made the right choice in this one to foreground the characters who do the fighting more. Yeah, you get much more Duncan Idaho, much less Suthria Howard, because this film is, again, ultimately, as well as trying to tell the story of Dune, trying to make something that is just a great slice of cinema.
Yeah, and I think it moves very steadily through the plot in a way that, for the most part, works pretty well as a film. It's quite oddly paced in a way. Like, I think pretty much all the negatives anyone ever comes up on this film, and I'm apparently going to be no different, is the pacing in that it's kind of half a film.
Yeah, it has a sudden stop.
It just kind of ends. There's a nice couple of shots as they walk dramatically off into adventure, but it's not really an ending in the traditional sense.
I mean, the title card says on it, like, Dune Part 1.
I was prepared, but still.
Yeah.
But even compared to, like, Infinity War, it's not the most well-paced of stops.
No, it is very much half a story if it is a complete film. Yeah, and they've made some interesting decisions. For example, there's much more Caladan in this film than there is in the book or in the other adaptations it's had. I think it's an interesting choice. I mean, the book is a slow start, and this is even a slightly slower start than the book, actually.
Yeah, Caladan, for those of us in the sad regular person seats, is the planet they're on before they go to Arrakis.
Yeah, the homeworld of House Atreides, yeah.
Yes, I remember thinking that. It seemed like there was a bit more hanging around at home, establishing the characters before they toddled off to Arrakis. I mean, I guess ultimately there's interior stuff in the books they couldn't really reproduce any other way. It works fine. It gets the relationships through fairly quickly. You know, there's a fairly standard rebellious royal son chat between Paul and his father, played by Oscar Isaac, and it's pretty tropey stuff. Like, the characters do come across as sometimes as kind of, I guess, what you call sci-fi tropey characters. Paul especially, I don't know if he gets a huge amount of personality apart from a vague sense of tortured protagonist.
I think there's a thing in the book, you obviously get so much of the inner life of the characters. Because it was written in the 1960s, they use the Universalist Perspective, which is used in Lord of the Rings, but is something that's kind of gone out of fashion amongst prose writers. And what this means is that you get every character's thoughts. There's no like one point of view character. There's a point of view character, like a main character in each scene, but like almost every character's thoughts are brought into it. Sometimes that's done because of there's Bene Gesserit characters who are good at intuiting people's thoughts from the sort of subtle cues of their body language and things like that, which allows characters' inner worlds to be drawn out into scenes. And all this stuff works very well in a book, but yeah, in a film it's more difficult, and yeah, definitely a visuals-led film. Again, another comparison to the Lynch one. The Lynch adaptation really falls down a rabbit hole of trying to bring the inner worlds out with ridiculous whisper ASMR style voiceover, which they steered as far away from as possible in this, which I'm glad of. But yeah, I think there is an element of falling back on some kind of sci-fi protagonist archetypes, shall we say. You know, there's the kind of the strong father figure who's maybe a bit distant a bit cold. There's his son who's searching for his way in the world. I mean, it's not breaking new grounds in terms of characterization.
Yeah, and this does work to the film's advantage because she's also quite a major character. I always felt like Jessica came across as a more interesting and conflicted and non-obvious character than Paul did.
Yeah, I think it's partly because of Rebecca Ferguson's performance. I think she's excellent in this film. I must say, like, everyone is perfectly cast. I mean, the casting, they just absolutely nailed it. And everyone's great, and there's so many people. We're going to do a disservice to someone who was great and not mention them inevitably. But I do think it standouts. One is Rebecca Ferguson playing Lady Jessica. I read an interview with her, and I think when she was saying that, like, she had some reservations about the character, I think, in that she's like, you know, on the surface, she's like a mother and a concubine and a sort of scheming person in the background a bit. And, you know, and she's emotionally complex, realized character in the book. But I really think she worked hard to make Jessica feel like a fully rounded person, you know, with these internal conflicts. She's got her loyalty to the Bene Gesserit, she's got her loyalty to Atreides, her love for her, you know, her son especially, but also her partner, the Duke. So I think she's done a really good job of bringing that character to life. And I think also there's a lot of focus on her. There's key bits, obviously, that are of the film about Jessica and Paul kind of on the run, which, you know, there's some great bits and pieces there in it. They've done a good job of, like, building up the characters in those scenes.
Yeah, I don't know if it was because I really needed to pee by then. I found some of the bits after they've fled the compound. I don't know, maybe it felt a bit less focused or less, I don't know. I found the intrigue stuff in the compound a bit easier to process as this is interesting than when they were just running around the desert. But hopefully that'll pick up in the second film, if and when they make it.
Yeah, that's the sort of bridging section into, the meeting the Fremen. There's like other versions kind of skipped over that bit, you know, sort of get straight to the fight with Jameis and things like that. The whole section in Arrakeen, which I'm not sure if they actually say the name of the walled citadel in the film, you know, they kind of bring the whole place to life. Again, the architecture and production design is phenomenal. I really liked how they gave each environment its own kind of really distinctive identity. Like, Caladan kind of looks somewhere between sort of Greek island and Norwegian islands and stuff, you know, which is quite good. Obviously, there's lots of kind of modernist Middle Eastern style architecture for Arrakis and Arrakeen. The Gidi Prime, the homeworlds of the Harkonnen, is a sort of horrible, scarred industrial wasteland. And again, possibly one of my favourite bits is they got Salusa Secundus into this adaptation, the training planet of the Sardaukar. And yeah, they managed to make the Sardaukar properly scary, which again, it come across in the book how, like, incredible they are, how awful they are, the sort of brilliant fighters. And yeah, they really nailed that in the film.
Yeah, I think one of the best action bits, actually one of the best action bits was probably Duncan Idaho having his showdown with them.
Yeah, strong bit. Yeah, sort of, again, a bit in the book that, yeah, it's a key bit of the book, but they really made this like a major feature of this film. And again, I think one of the standout performances is Jason Momoa, partly because he's got the warm relationship with Paul, in some ways more of like a surrogate father than the sort of more distant Duke figure. Although they did a good job of, through hair and makeup and stuff, of really making it Timothy Chalamet looked like he could be Oscar Isaac's son.
But yeah, I'll be interested to see how successful this ends up being. As I say, they went fairly hard for this is involved sci-fi fantasy, we're doing the tropes, we're taking them seriously. I'll be interested to see if it can, go wide and make the necessary huge pile of money. I think Game of Thrones mostly managed it by focusing a bit more on characterization and chatty jokes, which this is very determinedly not doing.
Yeah, and there is the element of it's like, sci-fi or fantasy, but the primary thing is the human political elements. There's less quest for the tech or magical item, more powerful houses jockeying for positions of status. They're selling this very hard as kind of go see it in the biggest screen possible. They really obviously want to get people into the cinemas. In America, it's been released simultaneously on HBO Max, so you can watch it at home if you're concerned about COVID or things like that. We went to see it on Britain's biggest cinema screen, so I think we did what the marketing told us to do.
Denny Villeneuve will be proud of us.
He will. But yeah, I think they're trying to make this an event film. I read something recently that box office hasn't gone back to, I think, exactly where it was pre-pandemic, but big event films are drawing people out. Like James Bond, especially in Britain, made a lot of money because it was a sort of, you must see this Bond film, It's certainly a big cultural event in Britain every few years when a Bond film comes out. And I guess they're trying to make this be one of those kind of you must go see it films to really get people into the cinema.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably not a representative group because I guess there are probably enough hardcore fans to do it, but the IMAX in London was certainly full on the first Friday night. That's all I've got.
Well, we'll see. I mean, and obviously, as a big fan of both this film, as you can probably tell, and the books, I do hope that it's a big success and they make a sequel, which I'm sure everyone involved is angling for.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, one of my main criticisms is I'll be really disappointed if I don't make that sequel, you know. It's not exactly a damning condemnation of the first film, is it?
No, exactly, yeah. But it is also an indication of that it is a sudden stop when the stop comes.
Yeah, there's a bit shortly after the fall of House Atreides where there's a sort of sad montage of lots of stuff going on at the same time and how desperate and sad it all is. And I was very much sitting there thinking, is this the end of the first film? This feels like the end of a film. If this was a TV show episode, this is definitely where it would end. But then it keeps going for another 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I guess they hadn't yet reached whatever point in the desert. But yeah, to me that was the more natural stopping point, but I guess the trouble is then he'd have too much plot left to do. Like if he was doing a trilogy, maybe that's where he'd have stopped.
Yeah. There's also an element of the story they're trying to tell about the characters, and is that the kind of character journey comes when Paul embraces his destiny to be a Fremen warrior and ultimately a Fremen leader, which when he decides to go with them, and he says that kind of my path takes me into the desert. And also it's kind of more of a happy ending, I suppose, to end on they've joined up with the rebel Fremen against the Harkonnen, after the disaster. Yeah, so it's one of those character journey bits. That's where the characters kind of come to the sort of end of their story.
Well, yeah, I can't blame them for wanting to end more on a there's more story to tell moment than what a complete bummer. Because, it's not as if he's got the Marvel machine of investments to fall back on. People have to actually want to come back and see the next stage of the adventure. Okay, and second up, and of equal cultural importance, especially to teenage Nick, although I suspect teenage Alistair's interests may turn out to hold up better artistically as the years of roleplay. It's Venom, There Be Carnage. This is, of course, the sequel to 2018's Venom, directed by Andy Serkis, in which Tom Hardy returns as Eddie Brock and the voice of his black goopy life partner, who this time is locked in Mortal Kombat with serial killer Cletus Cassidy, played by Woody Harrelson, who has managed to get hold of a symbiote of his own through the obvious method of biting Eddie Brock's arm, which turns him into the red, goopy, tentacle-stabbing serial killer Carnage. We have both seen this film, which, as you can tell, is a breathtaking treatise on the human condition. Alistair, how was it for you?
Well, I'm not sure this is like a great film in the annals of cinema, but I did really enjoy watching it. It's just a fun film, and it is a recommendation of, something that's really, really fun. I mean, I think a lot of the reviews, for example, have homed in on the fact that it's like only 1 hour and 37 minutes long, and I do agree there are way too many films that are over 2 hours in length, and a lot of films that could be shorter. And I think that kind of gives you a sense of like, this is a film that's kind of optimized for fun enjoyment factor. Like I say, there isn't a huge amount of depth to this film, but it is just funny. It's got great sarcastic humor. It's quite absurd. It's not taking things too seriously. I'm not really sure if the kind of sarcastic, slightly absurd element to this sort of matches with Venom from the comics, but as someone who's not read the comics, I was very much here for this really silly film.
Yeah, the first Venom film was, I think, some sort of weird sleeper hit, because although a lot of that film was boring, once Eddie Brock finally became Venom, his relationship with the symbiote took on this weird, codependent, borderline abusive, but in a funny way, sense. Yeah, Tom Hardy showed a massive willingness to just hurl himself around the room, leap into lobster tanks, and generally have incredibly weird, protracted, hysterical shouting matches with himself. And pretty much everyone came out of it to say, yeah, I really love those scenes where Tom Hardy just went mental yelling at himself. And yeah, I guess they got those notes because the sequel is basically nothing but that. There are a few bridging scenes that move the Carnage plot forward, but aside from that, they very much got right. Well, what did the audience want? More scenes of Tom Hardy shrieking at a CGI black head. Well, that's basically what we're going to give you. That's basically all this film is. There's a brief plot beat in the middle where they break up. Tom Hardy sits in his apartment being a sad sack, and the CGI blob goes out on the town to a club. Gets covered in neon garlands and meets up-and-coming rapper Little Sims. But yeah, that's about it really. I went into this film thinking I'd be happy if there were a few more fun, silly scenes in the vein of the fun, silly scenes from the first one, and I was very happy to discover that they've basically just scribbled that over the whole film. Yeah,
they definitely got the audience feedback from the first film. I think I described this film as it's kind of like a buddy cop film, like Starsky and Hutch style, but like with a man and his weird alien goo thing that stuck to his brain. But yeah, they've kind of really found the fun in this. And there's more than just silliness and jokes to it. There's what I would describe as the minimum viable level of characterization, in that, they do give Eddie Brock a personality, and the emotional arc of the film is Venom and Brock learning to accept each other and sort of co-inhabit the same body, and that's the character journey. It kind of begins with them sort of at odds with each other and kind of arguing and fighting, and then they have the breakup bits, you said, and it kind of finishes with a almost like idealized form of their relationship. Shouldn't spoil the end of the film, but yeah, there is that arc to it of like Eddie Brock growing to accept that like Venom is a part of his life that he has to like live with. So it has that kind of structure to it, and that gives it more substance than just like a sort of series of comedy sketches about a man who yells at his oily inner demons.
Yeah, pretty, but there's, as you say, there's enough plot and characterization there to make it feel like a movie and not just a series of silly sketches that have been made just to be memed on the internet, although there's a lot of that. I mean, if you did want to talk about its relationship to the comic, and then apart from the basic premise of Venom and Carnage, well, to be fair, Carnage is, I guess, relatively comic faithful, and and unfortunately Carnage is also not that interesting. I mean, he's, to borrow a phrase from Alistair, he's very much the minimum viable villain for this film. He does what he needs to do to provide this film with a scary serial killer for Venom to bash around. But it's not an intense performance you'll remember for the rest of your life. It's very much a general movie serial killer performance. He's doing Hannibal Lecter, he's doing probably 20 other similar characters. I gather he may be summoning one of his own past characters from Natural Born Killers, a film I haven't seen. But yeah, he's fine. I was kind of hoping he would go for it and pull his relationship with the symbiote up to the same weird level as Tom Hardy, but then possibly having both Tom Hardy and Woody Harrelson doing that level of comical gurning might be a bit much, I don't know. Maybe it's for the best, but Woody Harrelson plays the villain fairly straight, so that Tom Hardy could be the only one doing whatever it is he's doing.
Yeah, I think it sort of works with he's just a sort of a big nasty villain. I guess one of the things about this film is that there's very little characterization for the characters that aren't Eddie Brock and Venom. So, kind of Cletus Cassidy is like just a really nasty, horrible serial killer. There's a bit about how he was abused, but that, has turned him into a bad person. But then I guess is the thing people say, which is not everyone who's abused becomes a serial killer. It's a sort of, I guess, a cinematic shorthand, to put it politely. But I guess the role that Carnage plays, and I don't know if this is similar in the comics, is that he's just something bigger and nastier than Venom, so that, Venom seems good by comparison.
That's kind of it, yeah. It's one of the things that helped set Venom off on the road to becoming a protagonist rather than just a villain in the comics, because he and Spider-Man had to team up a few times to fight Carnage, who was clearly even worse.
Yeah, and, Carnage's host is a serial killer who's still an awful person, even before he becomes a sort of alien monster.
Well, yeah, I think for all that people may complain that the version of Venom in this film is not that similar to the comic one, Carnage is relatively comics accurate, I think. I mean, they've changed his origin a little bit to splice Shriek into it, which saves them having to have them meet for the first time, which obviously means they have to spend even less scenes building up their relationship. It's just there, which again helps with the general efficiency of this film. But that aside, yeah, it's a relatively comics faithful version of Carnage, apart from the character design, which is, I'm not going to criticise this film from a comics accuracy perspective that much, because I don't think being more comics accurate would have been helped, but their Carnage design is really boring. It's just a red Venom. I'm sure they could have, summoned the comics design a bit more and made him a bit more interesting.
Yeah, he's got a few more tentacles. I think that was about, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit more tentacular, but aside from that, it's just a red Venom.
They'd even hang a sort of lantern on it when they have a bit when Venom goes, oh no, that's a red one.
I know. I liked how they've just abandoned the need to even pretend there's like a universe and a meaning to this. Like in the comics, there's a whole tranche of exposition about how Carnage has better powers because he was spawned on Earth, which has changed his makeup somehow. In the film, it's just, oh no, a red one. What does that mean?
Sounds like it means something, which I guess is passable.
Exactly. It's exactly the sort of subtle world building I was talking about earlier with Dune.
Yeah, it hints at a much deeper, more complex universe.
Another planet where red ones and black ones can live in harmony.
Yeah, and maybe there's even blue ones or something, who knows.
With the comics there certainly is, but I really hope we stop this before we get to the point of having to spawn the blue one, the orange one, and the yellow one.
Yeah, but I think there is something actually about the there's obviously, this whole thing how they've replaced a lot of the comics lore with that's a red one, in that they have kind of sat down and really thought that, like, this film has got to be like, it's going to be like light and fast. It's going to be entertaining. It's going to move quickly from like a sort of a funny bit of Eddie Brock arguing to himself to a gothic inflected action scene. And there is a kind of way they've really pared it down, like say tight running time. It's got like, this is the amount of characterization we need for the hero, this is the amount of characterization we need for a villain, this is like the plot, these are the characters we need to wield in. Like, it's cinema writing and directing done very well. I mean, I've read various books about cinema writing, and one of the things, the points they make is that you have to be very efficient in film, especially if you're used to writing novels, which you get a much just longer chance to say things. I mean, similar to what we're saying with Dune, that like there's so much rich inner life and prose in the book that they have to find a way to really, really efficiently bring to screen. And this film, they really, like, there's no waste. I don't really see what you would cut to make it shorter. I mean, it's already only an hour and 37 minutes. They really have sat down and thought about like what's going to be just like a fun experience and got that right.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an easy criticism to make that basically almost every other character, including both the female characters, have been pared down to the bare minimum so that these two white guys can spurt their blobs on each other or something. And God. And it's a valid point, but at the same time, considering how many times we've said it's good that this film's short, it's hard to advocate making the film longer so that the Shriek and Anne characters can have more time.
Yeah, it is what it is, and that's you get a fun cinematic experience out of it at the end, I suppose, and which is what it's aiming for. I did also like how it's got a sort of gothic aesthetic running through it. There's a wedding scene involving like a sort of gothic wedding in like an abandoned church. There's this sort of flashback to Cassidy growing up in this home for like kind of abandoned or unwanted children. That's a sort of gothic manor type thing that's all kind of scary, and there's rivets and details to the kind of carnage that he looks kind of like a horrible gothic nightmare, gothic architecture stroke monster come to life. Yeah, there's a kind of a real strong visual sense to this film, especially the bits involving like Cassidy and Carnage.
Well, yeah, he's locked up in Ravencroft Asylum, which is, in both the comics and the films, very clearly the Marvel version of DC's Arkham Asylum. You know, referencing Gothic literature in the title and being a massive Gothic castle where supervillains are stored. It all goes towards this nice sense of grim Gothic Tim Burton-ness on the side here.
Yeah, which I think, is something that really works as well.
Even though it's mostly, I guess is why I mentioned Tim Burton in a kind of camp, silly Halloween way rather than this is genuinely a horror film way. But it just adds to the over-the-top silliness of it, to be honest. It just makes it very operatic in a silly way.
Yeah, it's a sort of Gothic opera. You're right that it's not scary, but it does like kind of work as an aesthetic, and like if anything, closer to a Tim Burton Batman than a Christopher Nolan Batman, in that you're not supposed to take this seriously. It's supposed to be over the top, a bit silly, similar to like, again, a lot of Gothic architecture, over the top and overblown, but in a sort of quite creative and in this sense very fun way. Yeah, it's a 15, it's got violence in it, there's like things getting stabbed quite a bit, but at the same time it is just a bit of a romp, which is strange things to say, I suppose, but that's where we are with cinema.
There is a conscious choice being made, I could see whilst watching it, not to actually show Carnage killing too many people by stabbing them, even though he quite clearly does many times. But there's a clear attempt not to, show it too brutally or be too gratuitous about it. I don't know whether this managed to squeak a PG-13 in America. I wouldn't be surprised if it somehow did, but evidently we didn't let it get away with that here. We didn't give it, I guess, 12A, which is the equivalent.
I guess so. It's weird in America how the jump from PG-13 to R is a much bigger jump because you can't go to see an R without an adult. But whereas you can go to see a 15 without an adult if you're 15, or let's be honest, most cinemas if you're 14 or 13 and look tall or whatever. I think this is a film kind of, they're pitching it at a sort of, teenager cinema going audience. So they've got the certificate right, they've got the humour right, and they've got the sort of level of violence right.
Yes, and not to judge any of our fellow moviegoers, but even just in the screening we went to, I am confident there were people in that screening who were not yet 15.
Yeah.
And fair enough. Those people are very much the natural audience for this film. That's also the age I was when I was reading and enjoying Venom fighting Carnage comics.
Yeah, exactly. And also it's the age I was, when I was 14, I went to a lot of 15s and over. I think even The Matrix might have been a 15 when it first came out, and I wasn't 15 when I saw it.
So Venom, it's hard to say this is better than Dune, or indeed better than many good films, but I enjoyed this a lot more than I expected to. It's a lot better than the previous film, let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's definitely fun. I definitely recommend it. There's so many pitfalls of superhero films falling into taking it too seriously. It is really refreshing to see one that is just really aimed at fun and humour.
Yeah, after watching this, my main concern is if it is about to be absorbed into the MCU mass, which spoilers, I guess. One of the after credit scenes kind of suggests it might be. They might feel the need not to let it be quite so silly, and I think that would be a shame.
That's all we have time for. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please leave us a review in your podcatcher of choice, as it helps other people find out about the show. You can also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find other episodes of the podcast, bonus audio clips, and short written pieces by Nick and myself. If you head there now, you'll see an article I've written on the politics of Dune.
And you can also follow us on social media. We're available at Moderate Fantasy Violence on Facebook or MFV Podcast on Twitter. And if you go to MFV Podcast, I believe there is an exciting backlog of Alistair's tweets about London Film Festival to be enjoyed. Or you can go to my Twitter account at NickMB, where there is an exciting backlog of my tweets about my writing and I think a thread about urine I did whilst watching James Bond. So a wide variety of content out there to be enjoyed. And also more about my comics at nickbryan.com.
You can find more from me on Twitter, where I'm at AlistairJRBall, and you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com. Next time on Moderate Fantasy Violence, we'll be discussing the next MCU film, Chloe Zhao's film version of The Eternals, and we'll also be reviewing Edgar Wright's new time travel murder mystery, Last Night in Soho. Join us in the next episode for that chat. Until then, goodbye.
Bye. Stage of the adventure is, of course,
Carnage. First, I should go to the toilet. Hopefully, that won't also involve carnage.
I was going to say, and speaking of carnage, yeah, okay, fine. Bye, everyone.